Welcome to Leaders with Leverage. I'm your host, Susie Tomenchok, and I'm so glad to have you here today. I'm especially excited for you because a very good friend of mine will be joining me in the studio shortly. Her name is Beth Kotarba. She's the COO of Native Roots. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Beth is responsible for leading the support and production operations side of a network of cannabis dispensaries, including cultivation, flower processing, product manufacturing, product development, facilities, information technology, and supply chain. Wow, that's a lot. Beth draws upon her 30 years of experience in management consulting and corporate leadership to develop innovative operational processes and controls and performance measurement and reporting procedures to ensure financial strength and operational efficiency for Native Roots. Under her leadership for the past 5 years, annual revenues have grown by 30%, while the company as a whole has matured and evolved in terms of company culture, inclusivity and equity, and operations efficiencies. These are the 3 areas where she has had the largest impact. I'm so excited to welcome Beth today, and I think you're going to really pull a lot of great insights from her as a leader and somebody that uses leverage in her everyday. Welcome, Beth. I'm so excited to have you here. I did a quick intro of you, kind of like the more formal about you, and we're such good friends. I just wanted to have you have the opportunity to tell people a little bit about yourself that maybe we don't, like, as you introduce yourself at a cocktail party.
All right. Well, first of all, hi, Susie. So excited to be here with you. Thank you. I'm honored to get to talk to you. Yeah, my journey in, my professional journey obviously started a long time ago. I started off in very classical management consulting with Arthur Andersen in their management information systems division. So that was a long time ago that existed. But yeah, out of school, I started, it was a great place to start. It was a very strong culture. They gave you great training. I learned a lot of just really good basic skills. And I did consulting for almost 30 years. So it was comfortable to me. I did all different industries. I had a chance to do it. I started in Chicago. I got out of school and went to live in the city for 3 years and work with the consulting firm. And then I decided to move to Denver, and I was lucky enough to be able to transfer with Arthur Andersen. So then I got to see, a different place, different clients. And like I say, I did that in different iterations. I worked at a couple different firms, but basically the same kind of work, and generally even the same colleagues, because I moved around with colleagues that I knew. And then about not quite 6 years ago, I kind of felt like I wanted something different. I felt like there was more there for me. I was really lucky. I would add, part of my journey that worked really well for me is I had periods of time where I stepped back a little. I worked part-time. I was lucky enough to have really at the time some pretty progressive leaders who were forward-looking and allowed for a part-time schedule, which was really important to me. It gave me the balance that I needed at points in time in my life where I really needed it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that was hard. It's hard to watch other people going in directions that you're kind of like, oh gosh, should I be doing that? But the balance worked for me, and I had a lot of great role models along the way to help me feel good about what I was doing and still feel, good about my personal life as well. So that to me is a huge part of my journey that allowed me to get where I wanted. But like I say, I kind of got to the point then where I was like, okay, I'm ready to go. My kids are out, they're doing their thing. I'm ready to think about this differently. And I was feeling a little stifled. And so a little bit by chance, luck, I don't know what you want to call it, connected with a colleague that I had that had come to work for Native Roots, where I work now, Native Roots Cannabis Company. And we started talking. I was looking for something different. They were looking for someone to lead their operations, and it was not a natural fit. Like if you looked at it, my resume did not scream what they were looking for as an operational leader. And cannabis was a new industry, so that was kind of different for me to think about the implications of going to work in the industry. So it was a long process, which was probably good for both of us. And there were times where I was like, I don't know if I can do this, honestly, because it was so out of what I had been doing. But what I learned is that my consulting career really equipped me with the tools to step in, learn quickly, understand what they were doing, apply some critical thinking, and really help shape the operation. And I didn't have to have, detailed knowledge of how you grow cannabis, even though that was essentially what my job was to lead. It was more about how do I bring the resources together and the organization together to work cohesively. So yeah, it was scary in a lot of ways, but it was so good for me, and it has been so fun. And I feel like it's like a rejuvenation of what I do. And in a way, I'm like, operations is for me. It's really what I love. So that's kind of how I got here.
That's so interesting. And now you're the COO of,
Yes.
really overseeing a huge part of the business. And did you start out when you were in Illinois, were you thinking, I want to be a COO one day? Like, what did that future look like? As you journey back into your mindset then, what were you thinking?
Yeah, not this. I never, in my wildest dreams, first of all, never thought I'd be a COO. That never seemed in my career path, for one. And second, cannabis, obviously, no way would I have ever thought that would even be a job that you would work in. And I remember a lot of times my career just kind of kept moving along. And with consulting, you get to do different things.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of chance to look at clients and see what they did. And along the line, there wasn't really ever a place where I was like, wow, I want to do that every day. And Susie, you've consulted. That's how we got to know each other. So you know how that is. That variety was always great. So you kind of got many different jobs all the time.
Yeah.
And I would always kind of look at my skills because they were a lot of times very broad, not super deep in any one area. And I think, what am I going to do? And where am I going to go? And I was well into my career, and I would tell people, I still don't really know what I want to do when I grow up, right? Like, I still feel like there's something that this is going to lead to. Yeah. And when the time comes, hopefully I'll know it and we'll go. But yeah, I never dreamed. It wasn't like I want to be a COO someday.
Yeah.
It just kind of worked out.
It's interesting that you also say, like, this is just kind of one step in my journey, and you're always kind of like going, what I heard you say is, what is next? So how, when we think about advocating for ourselves and that journey in your career, what is your mindset around that so that you are open to new opportunities? Like, what advice do you give to somebody that's up and coming, looking back?
Yeah, the one thing that I have really learned, and I would tell young women, anyone really, don't be afraid to ask for and advocate for what you want. As I reflect back, I think I spent a lot of time thinking that my work and how well I was doing my job should be apparent to everyone, and they should know where I should know where I should go next, or ask me to take those opportunities and offer those. And that just doesn't happen. Other people aren't thinking about it the way you are. And so it took me, honestly, a really long time to learn that. And so, for example, in consulting, it's sit back and think, well, why didn't I get assigned that client? Or why didn't they give me the opportunity? And I think a lot of people do this, to take that on because I'm the logical person to do it. But I realized I wasn't telling them in strong terms, I want that. I can do that. And I think especially for any women, like I say, I went part-time. And when you come back from that, people view you in a certain way. I'm just going to say, they have you kind of stuck in this, oh, Beth is balancing, and and they kind of forget, and you have to remind them, no, I'm ready to go. I want to do this. This is what I want to do. And actually, in my role now as COO, when the COO was moving on, again, I thought, well, I should be the next person they should think about. And it wasn't necessarily obvious to them. And they, were going to go and interview these people. And I had to really start advocating. And I had some good help within the company for myself to say, well, I should be the logical choice. Mm-hmm. And I learned from that, you got to ask. You got to tell them, because people make assumptions about what you want, and they're not always right. And so don't be afraid to ask for what you want. The only thing they can say is no. Susie, I learned that from your book a lot, right? Like, if you don't ask, you'll be surprised what you can get when you ask. So
Yeah, or they'll just assume you won't ask and you're the path of least resistance, which I learned the hard way. And I love what you said about you're kind of like your own PR for yourself. And whether it's you were part-time and maybe you even felt a little bad about that, you might say it. I just worked with a client yesterday who she's very young in her role and she continuously says it to her peers, everyone around her. I'm like, quit saying that. They know it. All you're doing is you're placing these ideas in people's minds. So it goes both ways.
Yep.
Even if they say you're doing really, really great and we're going to look at you for a promotion, reminding them that you want this or you're saying it, you're just reiterating because they're on to something else. Their track is not about you. So you need to keep instilling that. And just like you do in marketing, 7 times the impressions to make it stick. So thinking about that, not in obnoxious ways. You don't put on like a sandwich board. Don't forget, I want that promotion. But you still, every once in a while, don't forget, hey, just so you know, I saw that this person got that project lead. I'd love to do that too. It doesn't have to
That's
feel icky.
That is so true. And as I now am in a position of leadership,
Yeah.
looking at it through that lens, I do find it really interesting. And I would tell people it does make a difference when you say, this is what I want to do. Because, like you say, I'm not thinking about that all the time. And I'm sometimes not connecting those dots.
Yeah.
But when they tell me it matters and I remember, and then it's like, okay, let's figure out, I can't do that for you, just do it for you, but I can help you do that if you let me know where you want. And so I've been on kind of both sides, and it's been interesting now as the leader when you do have influence on those things, and you also have a million other things on your mind, that it's really you hit the nail on the head. You have to promote for yourself for sure. And those people I remember, I do.
Yeah. And sometimes you learn that from the people that get things around you. So I try to really think about how do you take maybe something, I used to have a peer that always self-promoted and it was obnoxious. But when I would step back and see it and go, but he gets so much, that's really interesting. How can I apply that approach in a Susie way and not in
Right.
a way that he was?
And I do think in general, I'm going to stereotype a little, but I do think men in general are a little bit better at doing that self-promotion than women. I think, and I'll speak a lot for myself, it feels uncomfortable. It feels boastful.
Yeah.
It feels like I need to be really buttoned up and have every skill that I need to, check every box before I can do that. And I think that you have to give yourself a little grace and be a little bit okay with, putting it out there and going for things that make you uncomfortable.
Completely.
Because you are capable.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate that too, I like to also think about the way we feel about it or the way we hear it is really different than the way they hear it. So if you believe you understand exactly how they think, you're wrong. We're not mind readers and they don't hear those voices in our head that are so loud to us. So if we just accept that, it doesn't make it feel as boastful. And the more you do it, the more comfortable it feels to yourself.
It's true. And have a good network. I will, when you were saying that, I remember when I first started, it was so meaningful to me when people like you and our other colleagues that we get together would just say, no, because there are moments where you feel like, oh, a little bit of a imposter, I would say, and having that positive reinforcement from people that you respect is really important. I know it really helped me when I was getting started in the role to have people like you reinforcing what I was doing. No, you're good. You can do this.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. We always talk about network and how important it is, but when life is really busy and work is really busy, that is something that we really put to the side. Talk to me a little bit about how did you intentionally network or what are your hacks or what's your advice around really keeping that activity alive?
Yeah, and I will admit it has not been something that I have been particularly good at, but I'm learning how important that it is. And so, connect with people that also are good at initiating it. Like, Susie's the best, you are the best. And so, I'm I'll always make time for it. I'm not always the best at reaching out. So that's something that I have to work on. But I have found people that kind of match me that way, I guess I would say. Whether that's good or not, I don't know, but it does work for me when I've got those people who are a little bit better about setting up the time. And then, I think also having peers, people that have been at the level that you're at, even if they're not doing the exact same thing, the challenges are the same. And someone that you can feel confident, like kind of bearing your soul a little bit, right? Like, I don't know how to deal with this situation, or I've got, this going on, and being able to get that advice, and quite honestly, honest feedback too, right? Like, no, don't do that. And you have to be a little vulnerable. So you need some people that you trust, I think, outside of your organization. So for me, it's been peers that I've worked with, because we have that in common. And I'm starting to build some of those relationships as well within the cannabis industry, because I think that's important too, to share experiences in a environment where you're all kind of facing the same things too.
I think that's so key. And if I have to, as a coach, it's like, okay, what are our takeaways here? When I think about the way I network, because I was in sales and I'm such an extrovert, it does kind of filter really normally for me to reach out to people. But I always think about, who do I just want to keep in touch with, and how can I help people? And I'm always reaching out to them. But I also, who is kind of challenging to me, who is a little bit uncomfortable for me to reach out to. And just out of curiosity, how will that conversation go? So it's kind of like a challenge. So if you can have like different categories of people that you reach out to, and take time and make space to make that happen, it's really interesting.
I love that.
Yeah.
I need to apply them. I love that.
But that uncomfortable one, it's not always. And you talked about the gender. This is what the research says, but they say that we frame it really different, women versus men, where men know in business that it's about how do we help each other move our business forward, or each other. Like, it's really intentional, where women are like trying to build a relationship. And it's interesting to think about, just like we said, that mindset around advocating for yourself. People network for different reasons. Don't assume they think you're being selfish or it's for you. If that's getting in your way, you have to shift that.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think, the piece about, it comes naturally to you. If it doesn't, like for me, putting time on your calendar, like actually having time to think about things, makes you think about it, and then doing it and getting it on the calendar, and then you have to follow through, right? Like, it's like, okay, we're going to do this. So I'm still growing there, but it is really helpful.
As a leader, so just to tie that in, where I might be good at that, I know where your strengths are around leadership and anticipating the needs of the organization. What is a hack that you have around that? Like, what have you learned as a leader? You've changed not just industries, but the population of who you manage is really different. So talk a little bit about what you've learned in these last, how many years has it been since you've been COO?
It's been 5.5, it'll be 6 years in November. So yeah.
Wow. Well, talk about, what has a journey been for you as a leader, and what advice would you give me?
Yeah, for me, coming into an industry that I didn't really know much about, I didn't have much of a background. And I will also say it's an industry where there is extreme passion around what people do, around the plant, around its benefits for people, that I didn't really know and understand. And so for me, the biggest thing I did at first was just listen and be very careful about knowing what I don't know, right? Be aware of what you don't know. Be aware of what you bring to the table. Because I had a lot of learning to do, and consulting taught me this somewhat, because you have to go in and do it. Some people do this well, some people don't. But it's like, if I go in there and act like I have all the answers, there's no way, because I don't. But I had a lot of answers, and I had a lot I brought to the team there, and that they brought to me. So my first thing I did was establish like understand the organization. It was very mumbo jumbo. So it was like just understanding that and getting to know the team and identifying the people that I thought were going to help me get there. Identifying those stars, if you will, that like, well, maybe they didn't have the perfect background that I was used to, because they didn't. It was a wholly different set of employees than I was used to working with in consulting, because consultants are very type A. We worked with very corporate clients, so I had to sit back and learn a lot and really just absorb. And luckily, the folks at Native Roots were just wonderful. Like they could have been really, they could have made it tough. They didn't. They just opened up and were very willing to teach me. But I think the biggest thing I had to do was just learn, and that learning took a while. And I had to be okay saying, and I say this to people a lot, it's one of the big leadership things for me, is be okay that you're not the smartest one, because life is 100 times easier when your team in a lot of ways is smarter than you, because everybody has a role to play. But I see people that get threatened by that, and I'm like, oh, your life will be so much easier if your team is really competent, and if you're the one that knows everything is the center of all that information, you are going to have a really hard time. So be okay saying, hey, I don't know how to do that. Help me understand that. Be okay to admit when you don't know something, I guess was my takeaway that really helped me as a leader to gain the trust of my team and to learn. Because if you are afraid to admit that, you're going to be really uncomfortable and stressed.
Yeah.
So those were kind of how I got started. And I honestly, I would have to kind of sit back some days and go, okay, try to understand this perspective, or it's not going to work the way you always did things. But this team is amazingly smart and capable. They just come from a different angle than I did. I had managers that were illicit cannabis growers in their past life. I mean, that is a very different skill set of people.
Yeah.
And so I would also say just open-mindedness to learn and accept people and, get to their smarts, because very smart people, maybe just a different traditional upbringing, like they didn't have a college degree in something or whatever, but a lot did. So.
Wow, you gave me such a great visual. Like I pictured you in front of the team, but then when you said, like, I don't know, I almost saw like, a group with your arms around them, meaning like it's a team thing. Like you made space around the table, as I always use that as an analogy, where you're not at the front of the room, but you're like in the group. And then it builds that trust. That trust thing is so important. As a leader, that's really where you have to filter for, is where is the trust level? And if it is low, what can I do to increase that? Because that's the key to success, motivation, engagement, all those things that will keep people really rowing in the same direction as you.
It's so true. I always say, that it is one of the things I really try to do. Trust the people that work for you to make good decisions, and give them the space to make a mistake, and let them know that if they do, you're going to be there to help them get out of that mistake. You're not going to, blow up at them. It's like, okay, we made a mistake. Let's acknowledge it, but I am here to help you do it differently next time. And it's hard to do, especially when it's your responsibility. As leaders, you really are ultimately accountable for what happens. So you don't want those things. And so it's so easy to want to hold on to that and make all the decisions and make sure it all goes perfect. But you have to give your people a little room to make a mistake here and there. Because that's how we've all learned, right? Like I know I've learned some of my biggest lessons from my biggest mistakes. So
it's so
easy to say, hard to do,
totally,
but very important.
Totally. And on that point, it's like when in the heat of the moment, that's when you really need to make sure that you kind of hold on to that faith, that the trust is important, and letting them have the space to figure it out, because it's so much easier sometimes to jump in and fix it. But if you can hold off, it's the heat of the moment that's where you really grow.
It is. It's so true. And it is hard. It is hard to do, and they're not always going to do it the way you would do it.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like you have your vision of how it should be done, and everyone's not going to do it precisely that way, but that doesn't mean that it's not okay. And I had to let go of a lot of that coming from the consulting world
Yeah.
where everything was buttoned up in a PowerPoint presentation. I mean, your words mattered. Everything on the paper, we would agonize over a bullet point. And coming in, my team still kind of teases me because I love PowerPoint, and if I have the opportunity to like put something in PowerPoint, I do. I'm very visual, but it's like not everyone operated
Yeah.
that way, and it's like, okay, we're out of the world of PowerPoints here. Got to get used to it because you don't have to have that
Yeah.
to get stuff done. Although I still love it.
Yeah. I love it. It's messy. I think everybody's always looking for what is that key to being a good leader. And I think that the key is that it's not easy to hear, but it's a work in progress all the time.
It is. It is. And I have gone through some leadership trainings before. I'm like, ugh, here we go again. But you always learn,
Yeah.
there is always something that you can learn and do better. And you're always leading at different, hopefully, as you grow in your career, you're leading at different levels. So there's always new aspects to it that you have to learn.
Yeah. It can be fun too and very rewarding. So,
Very,
yeah.
very. I would say that's one thing over my 5 years. I am so incredibly proud of my team, and how I've watched them grow. And, in areas where they learn, and I can honestly say they learned from me. I have learned tremendously from them. They have learned from me, and we've made that work really well. And I'm really proud of so many of them. And a few of them have gone off to get some really nice jobs, and it's really a bummer because you put all this energy
Yeah.
into them. But you're also so proud of them because, with cannabis growing in other states, people need those people. And it's really hard because they're leaving to go do these great things. But you are so proud of them because it's like, okay, you're ready to go and you're going to do great.
Yeah.
So.
I love that. That was so good. You know me, because I'm like such a negotiation nerd, and this podcast is all about leverage. And as you and I have talked about before, leverage to me is not something where you're using it against somebody else, but when we take a moment to kind of look at the leverage around us in every conversation, it makes us more equipped to be agile in the moment and really be a problem solver. So with that lens, I want to dive a little deeper into leverage and how it shows up for you. Can you think of a challenging situation or just an example of when you did use leverage in a way that had a positive outcome?
Yeah. One of the things that I deal with, it feels like a lot, and it's one of the, I would say, more draining aspects of the job is, people and their pay, wanting more, more compensation, wanting a different role, whatever that is. And I deal with it on a couple levels, both from, direct reports sometimes, but also my leaders wanting wanting to do things for their teams. Mm-hmm. And what I have, found my leverage has been and what has works is being really careful not to just start with no, because a lot of times if I have a lot of advanced, it's like, no, like that's not, but that's not gonna work because, you have to have a reason. And so the two things that I try to do in those situations, whether it's directly with the person or someone else, is first get my facts. Like it's really important to know for me in this particular instance, what the history of that person is, right? Like what has been their journey at Native Roots. So I feel like I have a good sense of, how have we managed this person's career? What have we done? Understanding that. So for example, this happened recently. Someone wanted to give someone a bonus that was, pretty big. And I was like, wow. And my first reaction when I read it was, no. But I'm like, okay, let's be logical about this. Went back and was able to go into the conversation with, look, this is an example, the last 3 years, we've increased this person's salary by X percent. We have given this, role has changed, this. I think by kind of going in with those facts, it diffuses the emotion a little bit. It's like, because I do the same. I get emotional about my people.
Yeah.
They get emotional about them. And even if it's directly with the person, kind of setting the facts on the table, I think that neutralizes it. And then along with that is understanding why, what is driving this, right? And what is the reason, you're not feeling valued. I don't know if, other people relate to this, but it's a lot. I don't feel valued. That is like the key thing people always come with. And I think you really do need to understand, well, why are they feeling that way? For one, because you can't just tell someone, oh, yes, you're valued. But when you can, kind of say, well, here's how I see that we have shown you this value. And then turning it around to say, what does that look like to you? Because you would be surprised. Sometimes people have a hard time articulating that to you. And when you turn it around to say, well, what would that look like?
Yeah.
If we valued you, what does that look like? Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's other things. So then you can kind of get to it better. But those are kind of two things that I try to use when I know I'm going to be having those kinds of discussions.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. That is so good. Like mic drop good. That's such great advice. I think that's so tangible for people. And what it made me think about in negotiation is you never accept the first offer. And not because, obviously it's because there could be money on the table. But the other reason is if you say yes right away, you know that the other person knows that they left something that's still available. And that's what you said. Like if you just say no, you're signaling that you're just not listening. And so if you allow there to be more information and you get that and you've considered it, even if it ends up still being a no, at least you've kind of done the homework that somebody can at least say, oh, I understand the reason why.
And that you listened, right? Like that you did listen to their perspective. And a lot of times I would say there's something in there. There's usually something in there that they have a valid concern. So yeah, and it's been interesting reading your book because you sometimes then flip that. It's actually good because you flip that around and you think about how people are going to come to you with those same things using those same negotiation tactics. So.
I know when I work with people and they ask me the other side, I'm like, I feel like I'm kind of two-sided, and so it feels inauthentic sometimes because the advice on the other side, but it's so important we play both ways. But it doesn't have to be a negative experience if you really think about how to broaden the opportunities for everybody and understanding the interest. And at the end of the day, it is listening to understand. And as a leader, as we wrap up, I wanted that understanding and appreciation of people. You've talked a lot about that. If you look back on your career and you think about some feedback or advice that maybe you didn't understand fully at that moment, and now it lands with you differently, is there something that you can think about to leave us with?
Oh, one thing, I don't know if this will be exactly perfect, but I remember when I was looking to leave, I was with Hitachi Consulting, and it was becoming very not locally based, and that was always important to me. And I had a great mentor, and he happened to be my boss as well. And I remember going to him, telling him what I was thinking about doing, because I was going to go to another consulting firm. And I remember that he said to me, and he said it in a nice way, but he said, Beth, you can do better. And at the time I was a little offended because I felt like I was making this move where I was going to be a director in this firm and I was really gonna, make this difference. And he said, I think you've got more in you. He said, you're taking the safe path because this is familiar to you and it feels safe, but I think you can do more. And so I did what I was gonna do. And it wasn't long before, he told me some different situations that, about the particular job I was taking, and because he knew some of the players, and it wasn't long before I was like, he was so right. Like, I didn't quite understand what George was saying, but I was like, he was right. He was right. I needed more. I needed to push myself. And so to this day, I take myself back there a lot, and I thank him a lot. I'm like, you were right. I need to think about that. But that's one of the bigger ones for me that sticks
I
out.
love that. I love that. You should reach out to him and thank him for that today.
I do see him regularly still, and I tell him that. I'm like, you were like nailed it completely.
Love it.
So.
Well, thank you, Beth. This was enlightening for me, and I really appreciate your advice
you.
just all that you gave to us today. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Susie. It's always fun.